Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bet Right Sports Betting Podcast presented by the Six Pack Coverage Media Network. It's your host, Jeff Rowell, here with my co-host, Andrew Tanzi, coming at you to break down everything you need to know on the AFC South. That's right, 6 divisions down, 2 more to go. AFC South this week, AFC North next week. Go in-depth analysis on each team, give our projections for how we see the season playing out, any bets that we see in the market right now that stand out to us with value. We'll go through them. We'll talk about some player props at the end. Rue, you ready to get into the AFC South?
Oh yeah, that fall weather is right around the corner. Less
Getting a
than a
little
month.
cooler out here. It
Yeah,
is.
less than a month away from kickoff. Man, it's almost that time with 2 divisions left, and then we will be right there, my friend.
Home stretch, baby. All right, AFC South as a whole. Any overall takes from you?
No, it's the Colts are the clear favorite, but the odds are a little bit ridiculous.
That so clear? I don't think the Titans are that far behind.
From an odds perspective, I'm saying like they're minus 120 to win the division. So
which is crazy because I'm pretty sure when the offseason started, the Titans were the favorite to win the division, or at worst, they were like dead even.
Yeah, and this division's playing the NFC West, which we covered, AFC West, which we covered last week. So makes it a little bit tougher to take overs in this division. But overall, probably you could make a case for the weakest division in football, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, the one note that I wrote down was this is probably the worst collection. I mean, offense in general, yes, but more particularly passing offenses. This has to be the worst division of passing offenses I've ever seen.
Well, you also have the division leader at 9.5 wins, or that's their win total.
I mean, that's not that weird. Part of that's like schedule and who they play. I don't look at that too much. But yeah, I mean, that definitely speaks to what you're saying. There's no team with a double-digit win total, which kind of shows you that it's not that great of a division. But I mean, Texans, Jaguars, easily bottom 5 passing offense. Titans, I think they're going to be bottom 10, maybe bottom 5. The Colts maybe could be middle of the pack, but it's pretty ugly out here when it comes to offense. So
yes.
All right, let's jump into the reigning AFC South Division champions. The Tennessee Titans win total is sitting at a flat 9. They are plus 170 to repeat and win this division again, minus 110 to make the playoffs either way. Off season was full of a lot of things going on here. They added Robert Woods and Austin Hooper in the pass catching game, lost wide receivers A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, also lost tight end Anthony Firkser, backup running back Deontay Foreman, their best guard Roger Saffold, and on the defense they lost Jackrabbit Jenkins at cornerback and Rashaan Evans in the linebacking core, and then they drafted Treylon Burks, rookie wide receiver out of Arkansas in the first round, quarterback Malik Willis, and then running back Hassan Haskins out of Michigan later on in the draft to fill that running back 2 role. This is a very interesting team. So this is year 5 with Mike Vrabel as the Titans head coach. In his first 4 seasons as head coach of the Titans, 9-7, 9-7, 11-5, 12-5 over the win total in every season. It's been proven that he's a pretty darn good coach, but a lot of offseason changes. I think the roster clearly got worse. You could make a case that they kind of lucked into some wins last year. Maybe they weren't necessarily as dominant of a 1 seed as we're used to seeing going into the playoffs. Obviously lost in the first round. Kind of seeing it both ways here. What do you have on the Titans? Is this a team that you're high on, or are you fading them despite the success of head coach Mike Vrabel?
Oh, I hate this team so much, and this is
okay.
This is a prime regression spot. I still can't believe this team got the 1 seed last year. And you and I were actually pretty high on them heading into last year. We didn't like the Colts, so you and I ended up with a lot of Titans futures last year to win the division, make the playoffs. But you look at last season, 20th in yards per play, 21st in offensive success rate, 17th in yards per play allowed, 20th in overall team DVOA. That's not a 1 seed. There is major regression coming. You did 10 Pythagorean wins, 8 estimated wins. So they were just outperforming almost every metric out there. A few of their wins on their schedule last year. They beat the Rams, the eventual Super Bowl champions, putting up 194 total yards. They beat the 49ers, who went to the NFC championship game with a total of 278 yards, and beat the Saints with a total of 264 yards. You don't get all that is just, to me, an outlier season. Please go. Yeah, yes, you may speak.
Can I play devil's advocate just a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
They were doing this without their best player, centerpiece of their offense, Derrick Henry, and Julio
Yes,
Jones was in and out of the lineup. So
correct. Yeah, but there was a lot of turnovers in general are a unsustainable stat. And you look at that Rams game alone, I want to say Matt Stafford threw one, maybe two pick sixes. If not, it was two or three interceptions within their own territory, giving the ball. Regardless, 3 wins against two eventual very good teams that went deep in the playoffs. One won the Super Bowl with less than 300 yards, and the Saints, who, whatever, they won with 264 total yards. But you just fast forward to this year, you have an offensive line last year that wasn't great, and now you lose a few pieces. Derrick Henry, it was only a matter of time, and I think we all knew it was coming at some point that something went wrong. So now they either got to make a decision to where they start limiting his touches, or they keep giving him his pace for over 400 carries, and he could easily get hurt again. What did I say he was on pace for last year? 465 carries.
Yeah,
which
49 carries clear of the NFL record
yes.
was his pace.
Yeah, so
insane.
And I'll tell you what, a foot injury, I don't care what anyone says, if it's not more likely to get a foot injury for a big guy like that is scary. So you come out and you're giving them 25 plus carries per game this season. I don't like it. And you have Tannehill, who can't be trusted without a strong run game because this offense really relies on play action. And now you also downgrade at wide receivers. Like you said, there's been a ton of mixed reports about first round pick Treylon Burks out of camp, about his conditioning and other issues he's been having. Robert Woods is coming off an ACL injury. And then you turn over on the defensive side. They have a young secondary with Caleb Farley coming off a torn ACL. They only blitzed on 19% of plays last year, which was 5th fewest. So there's a lot of pressure on that defensive line to get to the quarterback. So last season, it just feels like everything kind of broke their way. Outside of the 2 weaker teams in this division, the schedule is pretty tough playing that AFC West, and pretty much there's really no guaranteed wins on their schedule. You never know. I mean, at interdivision games, the Texans or Jaguars could obviously pull out an upset or two. So my bet on them, I kind of like them at minus 110 to miss the playoffs. And I honestly think we see Malik Willis end up starting a few games this season.
Wow. Calling for Malik Willis. Interesting. I think I'm with you. I think I also kind of narrowed in on to miss the playoffs rather than under the win total. So I think, yeah, minus 110 on FanDuel. There's a minus 105 on MGM. So I think I'm with you there on the miss the playoffs. I echo a lot of the same sentiments that you were saying. I think the offensive line is worse. I think the offense is really going to struggle, especially when you look at some of the offenses they're going to have to play. They play the entire AFC North. They play the Bengals, the Cowboys. Like, I just don't think that they have the weapons to be able to hang with these offenses. I do think this is a very good defense. I don't think this is easily a top 10 defense. Could honestly even be
really?
top 5. I really do. I think they have a really good front seven. The secondary is a bit of a question mark. I do think one of their safeties, who's their safety that's really good?
Kevin Byard.
Kevin Byard, yeah, he's a good player. Jeffrey Simmons was a monster on the defensive line last year. Like, I think they have some pieces on defense, especially with Vrabel as the coach. I think that's going to be the way that they try and win these games, and they're going to try and bleed the clock out. But another thing that really helped them last year was they were able to play with a lead so much. Like, if they go down in a game, like, this is an offense that you can trust to erase a 14-point deficit like you would a team like the Chiefs or the Chargers. So I think that's really going to be an issue if they do go down in games. I just don't see the explosive passing offense to catch up with some of these teams. So I'm with you. I kind of like the under. I did mention some of those stats with Vrabel off the top. Like, there's a chance that he's just one of these coaches that I don't care what the win total is. I don't care what the roster looks like. Like, you just don't want to bet it under. I mean, obviously, we only have 4 seasons of data. It's not like he's Bill Belichick or Mike Tomlin where you have this for 15 years straight. But, I mean, if Vrabel does it again this year, if this team somehow wins 10 games, like, we may have to just sit back and say, like, all right, Mike Vrabel's one of those guys. We're not betting the under on this guy ever again.
Yeah, and to play devil's advocate to myself, you're getting I'm not extremely high on the Colts. I just chose to kind of take my shot elsewhere in the division, which we'll get to. But you're getting a team who was the 1 seed last year, won 12 games, and you're getting them at plus 170 to win the division. So if you're not that high on the Colts, and maybe you're not completely out on the Titans like us, I don't think it's a bad bet from a value perspective for them to win the division, because we're going to touch on the Colts in a second, but really the only slight upgrade they made was to Matt Ryan at quarterback. Other than that, the team around him is pretty net neutral, maybe a little bit worse, if anything. So I don't think from a value perspective, it's the worst bet ever to take the Titans to win the division.
I won't be taking it, but yeah, it is interesting.
No, I'm
to
not
see
taking.
a team.
I'm just saying, if you're not completely out on them like you and I are.
Yeah, you can make a case for it.
Yeah.
One interesting note I did see on their schedule, this is just kind of like a prime example of the difference between a first and a second place schedule that I thought was really interesting. So based on the Vegas win totals, the Colts have the second easiest schedule in the league. The Titans have the 24th easiest, and the three swing games were the Colts get to play the Patriots, while as the Titans get the Bills. Colts get the Vikings instead of the Packers, and the Colts get the Steelers instead of the Bengals. So just those three games. Obviously, there's still tough teams for both of them, but you can kind of see like Patriots are a good team, but I'd much rather play them than the Bills. I'd much rather play the Vikings than the Packers, even though you think they're the best team ever. So I thought that was an interesting note just to see how big of a difference that can make in the overall strength of schedule just from those three games from having a first place schedule.
Not only that, they go to Buffalo and they go to Green Bay. And this stretch at the start of November at Kansas City, come back home versus Denver, and then at Green Bay. That's a pretty brutal stretch. They have a week 6 bye, so they have a pretty tough stretch there in November into early December of games there where they're not going to get any break. So when you're getting an early bye week with a guy like Derrick Henry's carrying that load, it does get a little scary as you kind of head down the stretch of the season. So that's just the one big thing that does scare me off. Like I said, we saw that he's human. We saw he can get hurt. If he gets hurt again, they're not having that same magic they did last year and pulling out a 12-5 season without Derrick Henry.
Yeah, there's no way. Another stat I did find that I also thought was interesting. I know we bring up one score games every now and then. Over the last 2 years, the Titans are 13-4 in one score games, which is pretty crazy. Especially, I mean, look, if that's like a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers led team, like you can kind of make a case for it. But a team led by Ryan Tannehill, 13-4 in one score games of the past 2 years, you have to imagine that's going to regress at some point.
Well, it regressed in the playoffs when we both had a lot of money on them.
Yeah, that was a pretty bad spot for regression there. Thank you, Titans. So I think you already kind of answered this, but I did want to bring up a hypothetical. So if the Titans do struggle a little bit this season, they win 7 or 8 games, Tannehill doesn't look great. He actually has the highest cap hit in the league this year at $39 million, which is insane.
Wow.
They can save $27 million if they cut him going into next offseason. Do you think Ryan Tannehill is a Tennessee Titan next year, or is this Malik Willis's team and we've entered a new era in Tennessee?
It's a tough question. Because I personally was not high on Malik Willis coming in. Like when he was getting talk about getting drafted in the first round, I thought it was some of the most outrageous things I've ever heard.
And they didn't use a ton of capital on him. Like they could restart with a different quarterback. It doesn't have to be Willis, but I mean, you figured they'd give him a shot if they drafted him in, top few rounds.
So yeah, it's hard to predict next year, but like I said, I expect him, especially if the Titans are struggling. If they're out of the playoffs, come down these last few games late in the season, I expect Willis to at least get a run so they can have some data to go off of if it's worth cutting Tannehill. So
yeah,
I certainly think it's a possibility. I mean, if they don't start off, I already bet the Giants week 1 against them. Now the spread's +6.5, but I do think the Giants could end up winning that game. And then you got to go to Buffalo, then you play Vegas, then you play Indianapolis. So they could easily get off to a rough start before heading into that bye week. And then I already said that stretch a couple weeks after the bye week. So they could realistically be out of playoff contention pretty early on. Now, it's tough to say that only because I don't see the Colts really running.
Yeah, I was going to say there might not be anyone in this division that runs away with it. So
yeah, we'll see.
All right. So we're both out on the Titans, having to miss the playoffs at -110. Anything left to say on them before we go into the Colts?
Nope.
All right, let's do it. Head over to Indianapolis. Win total is 9.5, up to 10 in some places, depending on where you're looking. -125 to win the AFC South, -170 to make the playoffs. Gus Bradley, the king of cover 3 himself, comes over for the Raiders as the new defensive coordinator. Offseason acquisitions, the big one, quarterback Matt Ryan from the Atlanta Falcons. Also got defensive end Yannick Ngakoue, cornerback Stefan Gilmore, and safety Rodney McLeod from the Eagles. They drafted wide receiver Alec Pierce from Cincinnati in round 2. No real major draft picks, though. And then they lost quarterback Carson Wentz, wide receivers Zach Pascal and T.Y. Hilton, tight end Jack Doyle, and then a pair of cornerbacks Rock Ya-Sin and Xavier Rhodes. So, a lot of changes here for the Colts, the big one being at the quarterback position. Let's start off there. I know we touched on this a little bit when we talked about Washington. Matt Ryan taking over the reins from Carson Wentz. What do you expect to see from Matt Ryan? How big of an upgrade is he for you? And how do you see that shaking out?
It's weird. I feel like the Colts, from some podcasts I've listened to, some articles I've read, the Colts are getting a lot of love because of this Matt Ryan move. Now, do I
Matt
think
Ryan's going to win MVP according to the general
yeah,
opinion. He's the greatest quarterback
yeah.
in the league, and the Colts are going to go undefeated, and he's going to win MVP.
Do I think he's an upgrade from Wentz? Yes. Do I think it's a landslide upgrade? No. I mean, there's no doubt this team should have won more games last year, and a lot of that was on Wentz. Every time they had to rely on Wentz, he cracked. But what have we seen from Matt Ryan over the last however many years? I know the Falcons haven't been a great team, but he's had solid weapons on offense. So I don't know what and look, Michael Pittman's a great receiver, but I don't consider him like a superstar receiver. I don't
Not as good as Calvin Ridley.
Exactly. He's not as good as Calvin Ridley or maybe even Kyle Pitts. I know we haven't really seen what he can do yet.
You can make the case.
So it's you're relying a lot on the run game and defense, just like you kind of did last year. And it's just really if you can keep those numbers where they were last year in terms of a top 5 run game and top 10 defense, Ryan can be slightly above average, and maybe some of those one-score games flip the other way if you don't have a guy like Wentz making those mistakes. So I think it's right that they're the favorite, but however, I'm very worried about this defense. So I'd love for this team to put like a 11-6 or 12-5 record together and fade them in the playoffs, because defensively, you have the linebacker formerly known as Darius Leonard, now Shaquille, out with back surgery, no timetable for his return. Stefan Gilmore, he's good. It's a big name guy, but he's 31 years old. He's kind of been bouncing around the league over the last however many years. Their other corner is now listed as Brandon Faccion. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. 27 years old. He was undrafted and signed midway through the season last year by the Raiders off the Chargers practice squad. So that's not a very encouraging sign. And then, like you said, Gus Bradley's coming over. Raiders allowed the 26th most points in the league, or no, 26 worst points per game allowed last year.
They were really bad on defense.
2020, he was with the Chargers. They allowed 26.6 points per game, which was 23rd. So he had some success before that, but he's a guy who we know refuses to blitz. He blitzed at 12% last year. The next closest in the league was 16. The Colts were at 20, which is still low, but it puts a ton of pressure on that defensive line. So now, like I said, you're relying on a 31-year-old Stefan Gilmore to cover and a young, unproven cornerback. So it raises a few red flags for me. I think I think they should win this division. But I'm hoping they build up some steam so I can kind of fade them throughout the year in big matchups and in the playoffs. So
yeah, I think I'm kind of with you. I do have a ticket on them to win the division back when it was at plus money on draft night. I don't know if I would bet it now at minus 125. I think they're the most likely, but I could also see some upside with the Jaguars. I don't think the Titans are completely dead. I did look up some nice advanced stats on Carson Wentz versus Matt Ryan just to really drive home the point that I don't think Matt Ryan's that big of an upgrade. Carson Wentz ranked higher in DVOA, QBR, and EPA per play last season by a pretty wide margin and pretty much every metric. Now, I feel like some of these, like it's almost hard to quantify with statistics, even advanced stats on like some of the plays that Carson Wentz makes. Like I don't even know how you quantify like a left-handed interception at your own 1 yard line. So like maybe part of that's not baked into the numbers, but like there was literally nothing you could look at from a statistical standpoint last season that would tell you that Matt Ryan is any better than Carson Wentz. So I just think it's kind of crazy when I hear all these people saying like, you would think Matt Ryan is like Patrick Mahomes coming over, is going to take this team to some next level. Like, I don't think he's much better than Carson Wentz.
Much better. Accuracy stats, he is better. If you go
okay,
to
that's fine. But I don't know.
Look, I'm with you. It's an upgrade.
Phillip Rivers the year before. Like I just kind of he's going to be like Rivers and Wentz.
That's what it is.
Boat. They're going to win 9 or 10 games. Like I don't really see much changing from what we've seen out of the Colts the last two years. They're a very good team. They're a stable team. I don't think they have any kind of ceiling. I also don't think they have a low floor. Like I think they're going to win a decent amount of games, but I also think that they have absolutely no chance to win the AFC or anything like that.
But here's what you want. You want them they open up against Houston. You want them to win that game by 20 points. Then they play Jacksonville. You want them to win that game by 20 points. And then they go and play Kansas City, so we get a favorable spread in that game, and then we absolutely unload on Kansas City. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that's what I want to happen. I want them to blow out those first 2 games and then come home and play Kansas City, and we take Kansas City.
Maybe the Chargers beat the Chiefs in week 2. They're a little angry.
Exactly. It could set up for a great spot. So mark that down. Sunday, September 25th.
All right, so real quick, while we're on this team, since we do have 2 of these teams playing each other in week 1, obviously we'll do our full week 1 breakdown when we get there. But Colts are an 8-point home favorite against the Texans, a team we'll talk about in a minute here in week 1. Pretty rare to see actually the Colts are on the road in this game. It's pretty rare to see a road team favored by more than a touchdown in a division game in week 1 this early in the season. Is this a game that you have any betting takes on at this point?
No, I'll get to the Texans in a second, but I tried very hard to convince myself to take the Texans and I couldn't do it. So it's probably going to be a pass for me. I don't know that I want to tease it. I mean, I might, because I just think Jonathan Taylor could pretty much run all over the Texans defense. So it could end up being a teaser spot for me, but nothing right now. It's not a Texans play like I wanted it to be.
I think I'm going to bet the Texans.
That's fair. Okay.
All right. I think I like them at +8. I haven't bet it yet, but I think that's where I'm leaning. So
all right.
To see if you were there with me or not. Doesn't sound like you're there yet.
I tried. I couldn't get there.
All right. Anything left to say on the Colts?
Nope.
All right. Let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Win total sitting at 6.5, +800 to win the division, +450 to make the playoffs. Obviously, the big change, Urban Meyer out as head coach. We already knew that from last year. Doug Peterson, our former Super Bowl winning head coach, takes over for the Jaguars. Ton of offseason moves. They added wide receiver Christian Kirk, running back Travis Etienne is going to be back fully from his injury. Sounds like James Robinson may even join him in the backfield in week 1, coming off an Achilles injury. So they should be a big help to the offense. Tight end Evan Ingram from the Giants, right guard Brandon Sheriff from the Commanders. They also got Zay Jones for some wide receiver depth. Foyesade Olakun. I'm definitely butchering his name. He was the guy that led the NFL in tackles last year on the Falcons. They did lose wide receiver DJ Chark and linebacker Myles Garrett. And then in the draft,
Myles Jack.
Yeah, Myles Garrett would be a big loss. Myles Jack, not that big of a deal. They drafted Trayvon Walker, number 1 overall, and then also took a linebacker out of Utah, Devin Lloyd, later on in the draft. What are we feeling here on the Jaguars? Do you think that the transition from Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson is just going to unlock a world of potential, and the Trevor Lawrence that we were all hoping to see last year is going to break out? Or do you have concerns that maybe Lawrence isn't quite as polished of a prospect as we were all expecting coming into the league?
So I love the hire of Doug Peterson. I think he's a great coach for a young quarterback like Lawrence. Now, I'm not out on Lawrence like I am a guy like Justin Fields, but it has nothing to do with the way Lawrence played last year, because he was atrocious, maybe worse, if not, or it may be worse than Fields. However, I kind of look at this team. They're just young across the board. It's a young team led by a young quarterback. And I'm making this comparison loosely. I'm not saying they're going to go, make a run at the Super Bowl. I'm just saying they're similar to last year's Bengals, where there's not expectations for them. They have a young core of players. So if things click into place, I want to play the extreme version of that. So I played them at
Who's Jamar Chase?
Relax. I'm saying I said I made a loose comparison, as in it's a young team.
No, I like the comparison. I really like that.
Yeah, I do. They don't have expectations. A young, high drafted quarterback. Obviously he's not coming off an injury. He might as well have been injured all day. He was playing injured. Let's go with that. He was playing injured. That's
brain injury, couldn't read a defense.
Yeah. So I took them at +700 to win the division.
Okay.
But at the same time, I could see them going under 6.5 wins. So it's just like two extremes where it wouldn't surprise me if they sucked. But if things click, I want to get a piece of them at +700 to win a division that I don't think is that great. So they upset one game against the Colts or something. They're in position towards the end of the season to compete for the division. So I want a piece of that. So it's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Okay. I like that take. Yeah, I think my only issue, I think the offense, they have a lot of weapons. I definitely think Trevor Lawrence can look a lot better than he did last year. My only issue is they just don't have that real top end talent. Maybe Travis Etienne could come in and just be incredible, but they don't have a number 1 wide receiver. Christian Kirk's fine. Marvin Jones is fine as the number 2. Laquan Treadwell, a couple decent tight ends like Dan Arnold and Evan Ingram, but they don't have a locked in number 1 wide receiver, which I think hurts them a little bit. I feel I'd feel a little bit better about Lawrence if I knew he had that one guy that he could go to no matter what. Maybe he'll develop that chemistry, but I think that's my one concern. They are a team. I did find an interesting schedule note. They only have 7 real home games. I think they're the only team in the league. So the AFC only starts off with 8 home games and 9 road games this year. And then they also have one of their games in London against the Broncos, which counts as a home game for them. So only 7 home games, which is not great. Not that they have some incredible home field advantage, but, it's a little bit of a negative on their schedule. The defense is still definitely a big concern for me. I think they were second worst in the league last year in most metrics, behind only the Jets. If Trayvon Walker can make like a big impact, maybe that makes a big difference. But I definitely have some concerns in the secondary, like Shaquille Griffin and Tyson Campbell, who I'm seeing as their starting cornerbacks. Neither of their safeties are really top half of the league players. Now, maybe that doesn't manifest itself that much in this division. Like I was saying off the top, like this is one of the worst passing offense divisions that I've ever seen. So like maybe in the division, at least, it doesn't necessarily come back to bite them, but I do still have a lot of concerns with their defense when they do go up against a vertical passing game.
Yeah, there's concerns across the board for me for sure, but there was concerns, and I'm going to keep going back to the comparison. The Bengals, their offensive line sucked, their defense wasn't good, their D line wasn't good, so it was they had arguably better skill positions and definitely better skill positions, but
I mean, we didn't know that going into last year. Like at this point last year, Jamar Chase couldn't catch a football. Like, the talent was like no one knew he was going to be that good.
Well, like the Bengals in 2020 were 27th in overall DVOA, 26th against the pass, 28th against the rush. They didn't progress a ton last year. They ended at 19th in DVOA, but it was enough of a jump. And I don't need the Jaguars to be a top 10 defense to have a shot at this division. I mean, their games are a little more favorable outside the schedule or outside of the division. They get the Jets, they get the Lions. So those are 2 road games who. Yeah, I honestly, I'd probably rather have those games at home because they're more winnable games, but I prefer getting them at home. Regardless, you have a more favorable schedule compared to the other teams in this division. Now, I don't know that they have what it takes to upset one of these AFC West teams, but you never know.
Okay. I kind of like the bet on the division. I like the idea of betting ceiling outcomes rather than Like I would never touch the win total here. Either way,
it's too high. The win, honestly, the win total is too high. I'll say. I mean, they were 3-14 last year. You're asking me to get 4 more wins right now. It's a big ass. So just let me play the extreme outcome of it to where they win the division at much better odds. So yeah. I mean, honestly, like gun to my head, you're making me bet a win total. I'm betting the under 6.5, and it's weird to say when I have a ticket on them to win the division, but it's just kind of how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Okay. Let's say everything clicks. Trevor Lawrence is everything we hoped he would be and more. Christian Kirk looks explosive in this offense. Travis Etienne's basically the next coming of Alvin Kamara. What is the absolute ceiling for this team? Like you want to bet ceiling outcomes, the division at plus 700. How far are you willing to take it? Could this team compete for the AFC? Could they make it to the Super Bowl like the Bengals did? How high do you think the ceiling is?
No, and look, I don't want to sit here and get carried away.
I'm not saying you're predicting it to happen, just like the top outcome. Like how high can this team go?
Well, they say they win the division. They win the division. Maybe they get a first round matchup like the Bengals did last year against the Raiders, which is it's a winnable game.
For sure.
It's so now it's tough to say that I can't see them competing with the big dogs because that's exactly what happened last year. No one expected Joe Burrow to go in and beat Patrick Mahomes.
I still don't know how they beat the Chiefs.
That's what I'm saying.
Game still doesn't comprehend in my brain.
But you go back and if things line up, it just kind of depends on how these other teams look. Maybe the Patriots sneak into the playoffs and that could be a favorable matchup. So sometimes things line up. Now, look, if this team wins the division, I would probably be fading them the first round of playoffs. Now, it's easy to say when we're however many months away from that happening.
Right, you never know what it's going to look like.
So,
yeah. So 80-1, you're betting them to win the AFC. 80-1.
80-1. No. See, I don't see this team having the ceiling of that Bengals team because even if Lawrence is great, I don't see him. Joe Burrow performed at an historic level last year, which I mean, it's almost. It is unsustainable what Joe Burrow did last year.
Trevor Lawrence is every bit the prospect Joe Burrow was.
Burrow had a 70% completion percentage and 8.9 yards per attempt. That was done over the course of 16 games in NFL history only 2 times. So it was a historic season from that perspective.
Pretty good.
And like you said, they don't have a weapon like Jamar Chase. So I feel like the ceiling is somewhat capped, but in a division that's not that good. So that I'm going to say that their ceiling is they win the division. I don't see them winning a playoff game. So to answer you in a long-winded way of answering your question,
Okay, we got there.
Winning the division is their ceiling.
Okay. Not a bad ceiling to have for a team that won 3 games last year.
You got to talk through it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm with you. I don't know if I should save this. We'll just save this for week 1. I was going to get into the week 1 game against the Commanders. We can save that for our week 1 breakdown.
I have a few prop spots I'm going to be looking week 1. I like Trevor Lawrence rushing yards. I'm going to be looking at that on a week-to-week basis. I think in this Doug Peterson offense, we're going to get a lot of those zone read type plays where Lawrence.
I hope so. I was really disappointed last year with his rushing. I thought it was going to be better than it was.
Yeah, that, and I'm going to be looking at Travis Etienne receptions on a week-to-week basis. I think that's going to be, like you said, he's going to be that Alvin Kamara type of guy, I think, where he's going to be
contingent on James Robinson missing.
No, because I still see him getting the majority of the passing work, especially early in the season. Robinson, even if he plays, I can't see him being taking on 60+% of snaps or anything like that.
Okay, keep an eye on that when the props drop. Anything left to say on the Jaguars?
Nope.
All right, take it down to Houston to break down the Texans. Win total is 4.5. They are 33-1 to win the division, 16-1 to make the playoffs. By most markets, they are projected to be the worst team in the NFL. They are the favorites for a worst record in the league. David Culley out as head coach. Lovie Smith is in. They also bring in former Colts and Chargers offensive coordinator Pep Hamilton to run the offense as the Texans' new OC. In the offseason, they brought in defensive ends Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison from Buffalo, cornerbacks Fabian Moreau and Steven Nelson, and running back Marlon Mack from the Colts. They drafted quarterback Derek Stingley from LSU, 4th overall. They also got a lineman and a safety a little bit later in the draft. Lost to Deshaun Watson, Tyrod Taylor, safety Justin Reed, and running back David Johnson, who was not really contributing anymore. And then their 2nd-round pick, wide receiver John Mechie, is now expected to miss the whole season with leukemia. So that was unfortunate. So it's just going to be Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins as the 2 wide receivers going into the season here. All right. Lovie Smith comes over from Illinois, racked up a whopping 17-39 record in that span, which is remarkable. To be fair, he did coach the Bears from 2004 to 2012 with great success, finished 81-63. So it was a long time ago, but that's a pretty impressive NFL record, has a decent resume, made it to a Super Bowl. Davis Mills showed some flashes towards the end of last season, great chemistry with Brandon Cooks. There's not a lot of talent on the offense. I think the offensive line projects to be a little bit better, but they're still going to be, I'm seeing them around 20 to 22nd in the league coming into this season. The defense is going to be bad. By all accounts, they were 26th in EPA per play last year. They were bad against the pass, bad against the run, couldn't pressure the quarterback. I like some of the offseason signings, like, Jerry Hughes, a little bit older. Mario Addison comes in. Like, they're not young guys, but I think they come over from the Bills. Maybe they give you some production. I think they're really going to need Derek Stingley to help lock down this secondary. You bring in Fabian Moreau as well. So I think there's some upgrades there, but it's obviously still a big, big question mark. For me, I really wanted, this is kind of like you, I really wanted to be in on this team. It's just, I like what they're doing, but I go through the schedule and I just can't find 5 wins. I searched 6 times and I can't get there.
No, look, going in, I thought this team was being rated worse than they really were. Like you said,
I still think that.
I saw some flashes from Davis Mills. So I went into a deep dive on this team to find some positives. And here's what I came up with. That's it. There's no positives on this team. This team is a bunch.
Come on, that's
this team is. I look up and down this roster, and all I see is placeholders in almost every position. And this team doesn't want to be
you
good.
Got some guys in here.
They don't want to be good. And I think the hire of Lovie Smith says that. He's a placeholder coach, just like David Culley was. I don't know why they didn't just bring David Culley back for another
What was the point of getting rid of David Culley? It makes no sense.
That's what I'm saying. You bring in Lovie Smith. He's not a coach you're going to have for a long time. It's just not.
Doesn't that tell you that they're trying to win?
No, it doesn't. I think
David Culley came in and lost a bunch of games and they fired him. If they wanted to lose, they would have kept him here.
This team wants to lose again and just get it. Davis Mills.
They want to win. They wouldn't have brought in Lovie Smith. Why would they have brought him in?
I don't know. To make it appear on the surface like they're trying to win, but what they really want is to get a high draft pick and get a quarterback. Because the reality of it is,
They don't need a quarterback. Davis Mills is the guy.
Davis Mills is not the guy.
He might be the guy.
He was a backup. He's a backup.
No, he could be the guy.
No, that's the difference.
He was good last year with no one around him.
No, that is the difference for me between the Texans and the Bears and the Jaguars and the Jets, maybe outside of the Falcons. Like, that's the only comparable team, is because all those other teams I just named, they have a young quarterback that they have a lot invested in. There's nothing invested in.
The Bears are investing in like destroying Justin Fields' career. What are they investing in?
I'm saying they've spent high draft capital and they have incentive to try to win with Justin Fields.
Davis Mills was a second-round pick. It's not like they drafted him in the 10th round.
The Texans don't have incentive. Davis Mills is fine. I don't want to hate on Davis Mills because he's a fine quarterback. He's not a franchise quarterback.
You don't know that.
I feel pretty confident in that.
I disagree.
I all this team, to me, all they have to offer me is Brandon Cooks props on a weekly basis. That's all I'm taking away from this team.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks is going to be good.
There's just no talent on offense. There's no talent on the D line. There's no talent in the set. Like, I mean, okay, they have Derek Stingley. He's a rookie cornerback. Who knows what we're going to get from him? But it's just, there's just nothing there. I can't get behind this team. And I look at them like in that week 1 matchup. How are they stopping a run game like the Colts? It's not happening.
They made some upgrades on defense.
Not a ton,
enough. But they're going to be better than last year on defense. I'm pretty confident in saying that.
I don't know, man. What games are they winning? Like what?
That's what I'm saying. There's not a ton of wins, but like, look, last year they won 4 games. I think they're a better team than last year. I'm having trouble finding 5 wins on the schedule. They have the 5th hardest schedule in the league. Like, I'm not betting the win total over, but I just think from a week-to-week perspective, I think I'm going to be on them. And honestly, the way that I'm betting on this team is really just taking other teams in these worst markets, like the fewest points scored, the worst record in the league. I'm taking other teams. I think there's value because I don't think the Texans are as bad as teams like the Bears or the Falcons. So like, that's kind of how I'm betting on them. I think they're as
bad. I think they're all.
I don't think so. I think they're better.
There. In what way, though?
Their team is better. I'd like them better.
What aspect? Like, there's no area you can really point to that, oh, the Texans are better here.
Yeah, they're better quarterback than the Bears. Their offensive line is a little bit better.
I mean, look, you can make a case Davis Mills is better, but it's not like a clear cut. He's better than Justin.
He's better than Justin Fields.
I think he's slightly better than Justin Fields. I do.
Okay, so we agree.
But it's not like a glaring thing where I'm going to give him a huge edge. And okay, the Bears is one of their winnable games. It's an away game though, so they're not going to be favored.
Yeah, you play against the Jaguars. So they're not going to be favored in any game this season right now. They're not projected to be a favorite once.
All right, so that being
said, the Jaguars twice. You get the Browns at home, the Commanders at home, the Giants at the Bears. Those are probably your winnable games. Maybe at the rate. Nah, you probably can't compete with the Raiders.
So that being said, I give you $100. You bet the over under. You're betting the under. You can't tell me this team's not going to be favored in any games and take it over.
Hey, look at the schedule. I come up with 4 or 5. Like I guess it's maybe slightly more 4 than there is 5, but I really don't want to bet it either way. Pass for me. But I think this is a team I'm going to be betting as a big dog in a decent amount of spots. I kind of like them week 1.
I mean, the teams you want to take them against are like, I don't want to take him against a team like the Colts who can just run the ball. I mean, maybe you take him against like the Raiders or the Giants or something like that. Maybe the Giants come out and play well like we.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's better or worse. That like I don't think they're going to be pretty bad against the run and the pass. Like I don't think they're going to be necessarily great against these elite passing offenses. Like I don't know if that's a better.
I'd still rather have a team passing the ball than being able to just hand it off and run right down the throat. You're more prone to mistakes when you're passing it.
I guess. All right. So you would bet the under on this team? Are you betting the under on this team?
1,000,000% I would bet the under.
Are you betting it?
Now that we're here, now that we're talking about it, I'm certainly considering it.
Okay. That's sad.
Look, you want them to be better. You want the Texans to be better, but it's not there yet.
I think they're going to be better.
All right.
Did you bet them week 3 against the Bears yet?
No, what were they? +3.
There's a +3.5 on Bet Online. DraftKings only has a +3 though.
All right, maybe we'll get there.
Okay, I think it's going to be their first win.
We'll see.
Do they play the Chargers again?
They play them in week
Rex
4.
Burkhead has week
Oh
4
my God.
circled on his calendar already.
Don't even get me started.
What if that's one of their wins? What if they beat the Chargers week 4? That could be a swing game. That could be the game that gets them to 5 wins.
Oh my God. So Marlon Mack is currently listed as the starter, but yeah, that's Rex Burkhead's going to be all over.
I
the
have
Chargers.
heard good things. I was going to kind of bring this up to you about offense. Damien Pierce. Yeah, I did hear some good reports out of him at camp. I think he had a big run in their first preseason game. So he's currently 25-1 offensive player of the year. Is he a guy that you
offensive
would consider
rookie of the year?
Oh, yeah. Not offensive player.
Let's not get carried away
of the year. Yeah. So, all right. So 25-1 offensive rookie of the year. Marlon Mack, 1,000 yards in 2019. Then obviously tore his Achilles, basically hasn't played in 2 years. Rex Burkhead is 32 years old. And I did do some double checking. Basically, winning is not a requirement. Team success is not a factor for offensive rookie of the year. Justin Herbert won it 7-9 Chargers team. Kyler won it on a 5-10 Cardinals team, and Saquon won it on a 5-11 Giants team just in the last 4 years. Is he a guy you would consider?
I don't know. I don't know that there's going to be enough. I don't know that the Texans are going to be able to do enough offensively for him to put up the numbers. And if you're talking about a guy who's going to come onto the scene, maybe not right away, because I feel like they're going to give Marlon Mack the first crack at it early in the season, then maybe turn to Damien Pierce after 6 weeks. That's limiting him to then 10 or 11 weeks to do his damage. And I don't know if it's going to be enough in this offense. They're not going to score a ton of points regardless of how much better you think they're going to be. And they're not going to be sustaining a bunch of drives for him to put up a bunch of yards. Now, I think it's a good class to take a shot on a guy in offensive rookie of the year because there's not really a clear-cut quarterback who can run away with it. Kenny Pickett may not even end up playing at all. Who knows what's going to shape up there. You got guys like Sky Moore and Chris Olave who I still think are good enough odds where you're still getting them both at like 10-1, where I think they still have more value than I would rather do that than take a shot on a guy on such a poor offense. It's just my take on it.
Fair enough. Just wanted to bring it up. Wasn't something that I had bet, but I was considering it. All right. Anything left to say on the Texans?
No.
Okay. Do you have any prop thoughts?
No, nothing except all the week-to-week ones already brought up.
All right. Can I interest you in a full fade of the Tennessee Titans offense?
All right. What do you got? Derrick Henry under?
Derrick Henry under 1,400 rushing yards. Derrick Henry under 13.5 rushing touchdowns. And Ryan Tannehill under 22.5 passing touchdowns. Basically just fading the crap out of the whole Titans offense. Thinking, Tannehill 3 seasons as a starter, 22, 31, and 21 touchdown passes on the Titans, under in 2 of the 3 seasons, obviously lost his top dog. A.J. Brown also lost Julio Jones. Robert Woods, okay, he's a nice receiver. He's never really been a true number 1. Treylon Burks, we don't know what to expect. And then Derrick Henry, like we kind of mentioned this earlier, he was on pace to break the NFL record for carries by almost 50 in a single season, coming off a foot injury, carried the ball 1,003 times over the last 3 seasons, and that includes missing half a year. So, 1,400 yards is just an insane line. I think the Titans offense as a whole takes a step back. Their offensive line takes a step back, and I'm just not projecting them to score that many touchdowns. So kind of betting the whole offense under.
So what's that, like 80 yards per game around, is that 1,400? Let's see.
Sounds about right.
82 yards, 82.35 yards per game. So, yeah, you're banking on him to get hurt, I feel like. Yeah, well, you're not even. He could still go under the number if he doesn't.
It's also like how many games do they be playing with a lead? Like, I know they want to run him 35 times, but like if they're playing the Chiefs and they go down 14-0, like it can't just give him the ball every play. Like, you got to throw the ball.
There's not a ton of great run defenses on their schedule, which is my only hesitancy, but I like it just because of the injury concern. And look, he could easily make it through the season healthy. Maybe it was just one fluke injury and it doesn't re-aggravate, but anyone
history tells us that's probably not the case.
Yeah. So yeah, I like it. I like the under, and Tannehill. Yeah. Fade Tannehill in every way. I'm going to be looking at, he's another one I'll be looking at as props on a weekly basis to take an under.
Yeah. If we get any Malik Willis action, that's an easy win.
Yes.
All right. Anything left to say? Are we wrapping up the AFC South?
I think so. One division left. I'm actually pretty excited for the for the North. It's in
Finally.
Yeah, I like that division. We'll have a scenario for Watson if he plays, Brissett if he plays, and Jimmy Garoppolo if he gets traded there.
And then we'll have a contingency for a 6-game suspension versus an 8-game suspension versus a 12-game suspension. It's going to be a long podcast.
Exactly.
So we'll be back next week to break down the AFC North. That will conclude our division by division breakdown. So we'll see everyone next week. Follow us on Twitter at BetRightPod. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Smash the like button on YouTube. From Jeff and Rue, we are the Bet Right Sports Betting Podcast, because every time you bet with us, you bet right.